The world still flares up every morning like a vast, boundless stage, a place where humans step in without the slightest suspicion that everything unfolding before their eyes is as real as it presents itself. But one only needs to ask a question that seems simple. If a person is blindfolded, ears plugged, and all sensations are silenced, does that so-called world still exist in the same sense? Certainty immediately wobbles, because if every gateway of contact with life is closed, the world no longer exists in the form that humans are familiar with. That reveals a sharp truth. What is called reality has never been an objective block lying outside. It is woven from very small movements right within the mind. The thing that everyone thinks is the foundation turns out to be just a sophisticated movie projected through doors that people rarely look straight into. The six sense organs. When light touches the eyes, sound touches the ears, a scent wafts past the tip of the nose, a bitter or sweet taste glides across the tongue, a sensation lightly touches the skin, or a concept is just born in the head. Those are not random, inconsequential moments. That is when the world is recreated, not recreated by matter, but by perception. The six sense organs operate like six doors opening to the universe, but at the same time, they are also where the mind gets dragged into countless unpredictable reactions. Just one image can drag along liking, disliking, fear, desire. A small noise tears apart serenity and lights up a whole region of anger. People easily believe that they are living amidst life, but mostly they are just living in a chain of reactions from these gateways. Every time a sense organ contacts a scene, another movement is born. That is when the six consciousnesses step in. But before speaking of the intervention of consciousness, one must see the nature of the six sense organs. Humans often believe eyes are for seeing, ears are for hearing, the tongue is for tasting, but that very belief makes them forget a deeper layer. What is seen is not the world, but only a version of the world passing through the sense organ, sliding past memory, crashing into habits, and then appearing. People think they see the truth, but mostly they only see what the mind is used to seeing. The glance of a stranger passing by is enough to make one's heart uncomfortable, not because that person did anything, but because a piece of some memory was awakened. What is called sight is no longer pure. It is encased by countless layers of perceptual dust. A layer of dust from old experiences, a layer of dust from expectations, a layer of dust from fear. So, saying that the world does not lie outside, but is born in every beat of contact of the six sense organs, is not a distant philosophical statement but a truth that is surprisingly close. Not only that, the sense organs, which should have been the path to bring the mind back to awakening, often become the place where ignorance creeps in. Because every time one looks without knowing what layer they are looking through, listens without knowing what habit they are listening with, the mind immediately falls into illusion. A dusty window frame can make the scenery outside distorted. Similarly, a sense organ not illuminated by awareness makes the entire world become a false version. Humans still open their eyes, still hear, still touch, but they rarely realize that they do not truly live in contact but live in the reactions born from that contact. Then from the sense organs, another layer appears. The six sense objects form: sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. Six objects viewed as existing independently out there actually have no fixed shape. The sound of a bell at the temple gate can be a sacred sound to this person, an annoying noise to another, and just a meaningless vibration to someone who is tired. The bell does not change, only the mind of the listener changes. That exposes a truth few recognize. The six sense objects never appear intact. They are always deformed by the lens of consciousness. They are not objective reality, but a reflection of the mind when it comes into contact with them. From a fleeting scent, Childhood memories can rush back. From an unintentional sentence, resentment can flare up. From a light touch, the desire to possess can jumpstart an entire story. The six sense objects are originally just phenomena drifting by, but when the mind clings to them, those phenomena become kindling for countless attachments. The problem does not lie with the object but lies in the fact that the mind refuses to look at the object as an object but continuously assigns meaning. A sound is just a sound, but the mind immediately turns it into praise or blame, insult or comfort. An image is just an image, but the mind immediately turns it into beautiful, desirable, or something to be avoided. That distortion is not the fault of the object but is the consequence of a machine operating behind the scenes, the six consciousnesses. When a sense organ touches an object, nothing would happen if consciousness did not arise. But consciousness always arises. In a split second, it analyzes, compares, judges, and constructs a story. There I see a person. Visual consciousness immediately identifies them as familiar or strange, pleasant or unpleasant. Mental consciousness intervenes and can stir up an old wound. And just from one look, a whole chain of emotions is born. Humans think they are present in life, but actually, they are living in reactions created by the six consciousnesses. A simple sentence can become an insult. A forced smile can be interpreted as a scheme. A silence can be seen as a rejection. It is not the event that makes people hurt, but the story constructed by consciousness from that event. When consciousness operates, it not only distinguishes but also creates the ego. Each reaction is a slice that nourishes the concept of I. I am right. I am hurt. I need to be protected. I must prove something. The six consciousnesses repeat their activity, connecting from recognition to sensation, from sensation to action, and then creating a new imprint in the mind. This chain operates continuously, creating cycles like a miniature samsara, happening not after death, but right within every living moment. People do not need to wait for the next life to be reborn. They are being reborn every minute in unconscious reactions. There is a subtle thing that few realize. When the six consciousnesses operate, they do not function separately but are interwoven into a network. Seeing arises, hearing follows, then feeling in the body flares up. All blend into a chain of reactions that seems natural, but is actually extremely mechanical. A look leads to a thought of anger. A thought of anger leads to a behavior. Behavior leads to a result. The result leaves a trace in the mind and becomes a habit pattern for the next time. Just like that, every piece of life is strung together into an endless wheel. A wheel where one thinks they are the initiator, but is actually just the one being swept away. If one does not see this nature, humans will think they are living for real. But when observing more closely, one sees that for the vast majority of time, they are only reacting. They look at a scene not to see but to evaluate. Hear a sound not to hear but to compare. Feel a sensation not to recognize but to cling to or drive away. All those reactions form a gigantic shadow called the world. But that world never stands still. It is just a continuous flow of movement created by the mind, which then mistakenly believes it is real. The sophistication of the six consciousnesses lies in the fact that they translate everything into a story bearing the imprint of fear, of memory, of expectation. For example, a person just silently faces you, but consciousness can turn that silence into a sign of coldness. Olfactory consciousness turns a scent into a reminder of the past. Tactile consciousness turns an accidental touch into the evocation of something forgotten. There is no moment that is purely the moment. Every moment becomes a new film constructed by what the mind carries along. Up to this point, one can clearly see that the world humans are living in is not objective reality but the story of the six sense organs, six sense objects, and 6 consciousnesses. A map drawn by one's own hand and then believed to be the actual land. An illusion nourished by the very lack of seeing of the mind. And because of not seeing, humans keep chasing, struggling, clinging, resisting, thinking they are handling life, but actually handling their own reactions. There are times when the truth reveals itself in a very small moment. When the mind stops, when there is no longer judgment or assigning meaning. An image is just an image. A sound is just a sound. But that moment is rare because most of the time consciousness has intruded too quickly. People are not quick enough to see the first arising fault. By the time one knows they are angry, the anger has already flared up. By the time one knows they are afraid, fear has already dominated the body and mind. By the time one knows they love, that love has sometimes already turned into expectation and binding. All because the process of recognition is overwhelmed by the process of reaction. The sense organ contacts the object. It should have been just a simple communion, but because consciousness intrudes, that communion is turned into interpretation. For example, hearing the wind, which should be just the movement of air, the mind can turn into a sign of uneasiness. For example, seeing someone's eyes, which should be just the intersection of two gazes, the mind turns into an evaluation or threat. The more one interprets, the further one gets from reality. The further one gets from reality, the more humans are led by the distortions of the mind. That is the reason many teachings emphasize. It is not the world that binds humans, but the very identification with the 6 sense organs, 6 sense objects, and 6 consciousnesses that binds them. When believing that I am seeing, I am hearing, I am feeling, the mind immediately constructs an owner of the experience, and that owner drags along an ego with layers of desires. Desiring to be loved, desiring to be understood, desiring to be recognized, desiring to avoid hurt. The more desires, the tighter the bindings. But the strange thing is that all these complex operations start from very small things. A streak of light, a sound, a fleeting sensation. Just that much is enough to create countless reactions. So saying the world lies in every contact is not a metaphor. It is reality exposed nakedly. Humans always enter the world through the 6 sense organs. The world is always shaped by the 6 sense objects. And every story is always retold by the 6 consciousnesses. Throughout life is a chain of contact, interpretation, reaction, suffering, repeated to the point that humans think it is natural. One can try observing this when a sound echoes. Before consciousness has a chance to intervene, there is only vibration. But humans are rarely in that first moment. They jump straight into prediction, comment, evaluation. The pristine moment is lost. The world is never seen as it is, but only seen as the mind has pre-shaped it. And that is the origin of every illusion. At a deeper level, not seeing the operation of the 6 sense organs, 6 sense objects, and 6 consciousnesses makes humans miss an important truth. All that they are experiencing is only the surface. Behind those layers of interaction hides a layer of silence that few return to. But to touch that layer, one must go through each of these sophisticated layers of activity. One must look straight at how the sense organ is dragged, the object is interpreted, consciousness is activated. One must clearly see every movement as if watching a mechanism, not a personal story. And right at this point, a question opens up. A question that can reverse the entire way of looking at life. If everything is just being created right within the mind, then what part of the human is truly free? If the world is built from contact and reaction, where is the part not dragged along by those movements? That question is not to be answered by the intellect, but to lead the mind back to a place few dare to look, where reality is no longer covered by concepts and stories. Amidst the countless movements of the 6 sense organs, 6 sense objects, and 6 consciousnesses, there is someone standing behind the stage, but dominating almost everything humans call inner life. That one does not scream, nor does it appear clearly, but is always present like a thin layer of smoke covering every moment. That is the false mind Vang Tam. Not the malicious type of mind as many mistakenly believe, but a mind that has forgotten itself. The mind no longer contacts reality directly, but only contacts what it draws out from reality. An image just peeks out. The false mind has already intruded and labeled it. Beautiful, ugly, needed, not needed. A sound is not yet complete. The false mind has already judged. Praise or blame, threat or comfort. A sensation just rises. The false mind immediately drags it into the flow of liking or disliking, wanting to keep or wanting to avoid. The mind no longer stands still long enough to see the truth. It jumps in to interpret even before the object has formed. Because of that, every living moment is distorted into countless stories. Stories about worry, stories about pain, stories about things unachieved or lost. Each story drags along an emotion, and each emotion drags along a new reaction. What makes the false mind dangerous is not because it is strong, but because it is too familiar. It has operated for so long that humans think it is themselves. People believe that I am thinking, I am wanting, I am afraid. But most of those thoughts, desires, fears are not spontaneous at all. They are just reflexes trained over the years. A reflex of unhealed memory, of unsatisfied demands, of old hurts that once left deep marks in the mind. The more one operates according to the false mind, the more insecure life becomes, because everything the false mind clings to is impermanent. Praise today can become blame tomorrow. A beautiful image can turn into something hard to look at over time. A person currently loved can become a stinging memory when they turn their back. The mind clings to things that are not durable and calls that happiness. Then when they change, it calls that suffering, not because life is impermanent, but because the false mind refuses to stand still amidst impermanence. But the most paradoxical thing is that the more one resists the false mind, the stronger it gets. The more one wants to extinguish it, the more it finds a way to rise up in another form. And when the mind tries to avoid it, the false mind has more reason to cling tight. It operates like a habit, and a habit is only strong when it is still unconsciously nourished. To liberate oneself from it is not by eliminating it but by looking straight at it, seeing the first thought just flash up, seeing the slight reaction not yet taken shape, seeing how the mind wants to label without letting it label, seeing completely, not intervening, not correcting, not judging. At that time, the false mind loses its grip, because it can only live when humans believe it is real. Reaching this point, another truth begins to appear. The false mind is not the primary cause. It is merely a consequence of something much deeper, something that scriptures call by the single word, ignorance. In daily life, ignorance is often misunderstood as a lack of knowledge, but in the depths of the path, ignorance is unrelated to words or intellect. It is not a matter of knowing little or knowing much. It is a state of forgetting the nature of reality, forgetting that the mind is inherently like a mirror, only reflecting without holding onto anything. But when it forgets, the mind begins to identify with every reflection. It no longer knows it is the mirror. It thinks it is the image in the mirror, and from there, an endless chain of operation is established. When the mind looks at life through a distorted view caused by ignorance, it generates love and hate, acceptance and avoidance. From love and hate, action is born. Action leaves an imprint. Imprints repeated over and over create habits. Habits become karma. And karma creates an ego that seems real, an I that is hurt, an I that needs protection, an I that must prove its value. That I is not real, but because it is nourished every day, it becomes the center around which every reaction revolves. In that flow of operation, humans think they are free. They say they choose this, decide that. But in reality, most of those choices are driven by pre-existing imprints. Someone thinks they love a person, but deeper down, it is just a pursuit of a model once printed in the mind. Someone thinks they are angry because of another person, but essentially, it is because an old wound was touched. Someone thinks they are living today, but inside, they are repeating countless reactions from yesterday. More surprisingly, even spiritual practice can be a product of karma. Some people strive in their practice not because they clearly see the path to liberation, but because the mind wants achievement, wants attainment, wants to become superior to others, wants to escape suffering, but starts from the very root of suffering, desire. Thus, the more they practice, the more tired they get. The more they practice, the further away they feel, because the truth of the path does not lie in achievement but lies in seeing clearly, seeing how the mind operates, seeing how every moment of rising and ceasing takes place, seeing that every reaction stems from ignorance. And right here, the cycle of samsara reveals itself in a completely different sense. One does not need to wait for the next life to see samsara. It happens right in the mental life of every day. Every time the mind does not see clearly, that is one instance of birth and death. Every ignorant reaction is a new lifetime. Every fear, desire, and anger is a rebirth into delusion. Humans open their eyes in the morning. Before even standing up, the mind is already running back and forth. What must be done? What must be achieved? What must be controlled? What must be avoided? Just leaving sleep, one steps into another dream. The dream of roles, responsibilities, hopes, fears, goals, the dream that humans call life. Every thought that arises carries within it an old inertia. Every unexamined emotion drags along a chain of consequences. And when those chains are not recognized, humans live their whole lives in their rotation while thinking they are awake. That is why scriptures call this world a drifting ocean of birth and death. Not birth and death after the body perishes, but birth and death right in every moment the mind is not clear. An idea arising is a new life. A reaction and scene is a cycle of samsara just framed. Looking at these operations, the question is no longer why do humans suffer, but how can they not suffer? Because everything is built on the foundation of ignorance. The mind has never truly seen the world as it is. The mind only sees through what it has experienced. It piles memory upon reality and calls that understanding. It builds up hope, then disappointment, then hope again, just like that, repeating over and over. And from that repetition, karma thickens. Karma is not a sentence but a habit that has become so familiar it operates automatically without the need for conscious thought. When karma operates, humans are no longer the controllers. They are just the ones being dragged along. But if everything is determined by old imprints, is there no path to liberation? No, precisely because that will is created from not seeing clearly. Just seeing clearly will cause the wheel to stop. Not stopping because of force, but because there is no longer a cause to continue. When the mind sees a delusion arise, the delusion immediately weakens. When the mind sees consciousness intruding, consciousness no longer has the ability to construct a story. When the mind sees the sense organ contact the object in the first moment, the sense organ and the object can no longer drag it away. Just by seeing, the cycle of karma can vanish like ash meeting the wind. But seeing here is not thinking about it, not interpreting it, but direct wakefulness right when the event is happening, recognizing a sensation when it is just faint, recognizing a concept when it is just beginning to take shape, recognizing the motivation of an action before the action occurs. That recognition does not need strength, does not need struggle, but only needs absolute honesty with every movement in the mind. An honesty that does not lean toward liking or disliking, does not try to find a better state, does not try to hold onto what is pleasant or eliminate what isn't pleasant. It is just seeing and stopping there. When that moment happens, humans no longer live in reflexes. They no longer are reborn into old memories, no longer fall into old roles. Every moment becomes a truly new moment, not died by the past or expectations of the future. Life becomes pristine as if experienced for the first time, and in that pristineness, the cycle of samsara right in daily life begins to dissolve. One can observe this very closely when anger flares up. If the mind is quick enough to see that anger rising, it cannot spread. When a fear just begins to take shape, if the mind sees the root of that fear, it will not dominate behavior. When a desire just kindles, if the mind clearly sees its motive, that desire will not turn into binding. All these small movements are links creating the wheel of karmic force, and when each link is identified, the whole machine stops. So what has made humans unable to see those movements? Because the mind is too busy with the stories it constructs itself. Every day countless thoughts run through the head, but people rarely stop to see where they come from. They only see the content of the thought, not the source of the thought. And because they don't see the source, they believe in the content. They believe that worry is real, anger is real, fear is real. But all those emotions are just the result of habits, imprints, and examined desires. At this time, what is necessary is not to adjust thoughts or emotions but to see how they arise. When seen clearly, there is nothing left to cling to. When there is nothing left to cling to, the mind becomes light. It no longer runs, nor does it hide. It stands still right amidst the movements of the sense organs, objects, and consciousness. And right at that standing still point, karmic force begins to soften and dissolve. If looking deeper, one will see that the so-called I, the entity everyone tries to protect, is just a collection of reactions. Each repeated reaction creates an illusion of a self, but that self is incredibly fragile. It changes in just a few seconds. Confident one moment, insecure the next, loving one moment, hating the next, determined one moment, giving up the next. That continuous change shows that the self has no true fulcrum. But because of not seeing, humans keep trying to protect it, trying to prove it, trying to make it become solid. And that very effort nourishes more insecurity. To see this, one does not need to dig deep into scriptures or seek lofty doctrines. One just needs to quietly observe daily life. Observe how the mind reacts when hearing a criticism. Observe how it shrinks when recalling a painful memory. Observe how it heats up when desire rises. Observe the churning when not achieving what is wanted. When observing long enough, one thing becomes clear. The mind is not free. It is controlled by invisible forces that it created itself. And that is the reason the Buddha did not teach humans to run away from the world but taught them to look straight into the world created by the mind. Because to escape suffering, one does not need to destroy everything, only need to clearly see how everything is operating. A non-judgmental seeing is a lamp shining straight into the darkness of ignorance. When the light turns on, darkness cannot exist. When ignorance dissolves, karma has no place to cling. When karma does not operate, the cycle of samsara right in the present closes itself. Amidst the chaotic vortex of the 6 sense organs, 6 sense objects, 6 consciousnesses, and the dense movements of the false mind, there is a surprise always present but rarely recognized. It is not noisy, does not try to intrude like consciousness. does not run after objects like dust, nor is it dragged away like the sense organs. It stands there, quietly majestic, neither accepting nor rejecting anything, a presence as thin as breath, but as enduring as the sky. That is the knowing nature Tanbit, or the non-deluded mind, the source of light that people search for everywhere, but has never left. What makes the knowing nature miraculous is not that it carries supernatural power, but that it is so simple that the false mind cannot grasp it. It is not a special state that only appears after years of practice. It is not the result of enlightenment or achievement. It has never been absent, only obscured by the thick dust of perceptual habits. When humans look at life through delusion, they do not see the knowing nature. When they stop delusion, the knowing nature naturally appears, just like the sun appears when clouds disperse. The sun has never risen or set, only the clouds come and go. When a person sits still, correcting nothing, judging nothing, only observing a sensation arising and passing away in that very moment, they are living in the knowing nature. When a sound rings out, and they only hear without creating a story about that sound, they are living in the knowing nature. When a thought flashes by but they are not dragged along by the content of that thought, the knowing nature is shining clearly. It adds nothing to the experience, nor subtracts anything. It only illuminates everything as it is. The knowing nature does not create liking or disliking. It does not decide what is right, what is wrong. It does not draw conclusions. It only opens up a space so vast that every movement of consciousness becomes clear. And when clear, they no longer have power like before. An anger when seen by the knowing nature cannot continue to burn. A fear when illuminated by that light will dissolve before it can become a storm. A negative thought when recognized will lose its inherent weight. But the most important thing is that the knowing nature bears no trace of the ego. When in the knowing nature, there is no longer the feeling of I am seeing, I am hearing, I am knowing. There is only a seeing taking place, a hearing taking place, a knowing taking place. No seer, no object to be seen, no hearer, no thing to be heard, only clarity operating as the natural essence of the mind. This very thing makes the knowing nature the most solid foundation in spiritual life. It is not hurt, not influenced, not shaken by any worldly circumstance. People often think liberation is a distant peak, a state that requires effort to win. But with the knowing nature, that journey does not lie ahead, but lies right in every present moment. When the false mind is no longer nourished by identification, it quiets itself. When consciousness is no longer energized by belief and stories, it falls away on its own. When the sense organ contacts the object and the mind does not run after it, the sense organ and object return to their correct functions, just a natural communication, not the root of suffering. Right at this point, a new kind of freedom is revealed, not a freedom based on will or control, but the freedom of not being dragged away. Humans still look but are not dazzled by the image, still hear but are not imprisoned in the sound, still feel but are not swirled into the emotion, still think but are not enslaved by the thought. Everything happens as before, but the mind is no longer submerged in it. That freedom is not brilliant, not showy, does not make a strong impression. It is quiet like a drop of water falling onto a flat lake. But that very quietness opens up a kind of peace never known before. A peace that does not depend on whether life is favorable or adverse, praise or blame, gain or loss. That peace does not come from life becoming easy, but from the mind no longer clinging to life to find a fulcrum. The paradox lies here. When the mind no longer seeks a truth to cling to, the new truth reveals itself. When the mind no longer tries to stop delusion, delusion quiets itself. When the mind no longer wants to become anyone, the bright natural essence opens up. When the mind no longer searches for a way to liberation, liberation is already right there like a door that was never closed. The path back to the knowing nature does not require leaving the world, does not need to find a place of seclusion, does not demand special conditions. It only demands a courage that is very thin but very real, the courage to stop, not run after the sense organs, not sink into the sense objects, not believe in consciousness, not identify with the false mind, stopping in a moment so small that there is no gap left for ignorance to intrude. At that time, a miracle happens. The world continues to operate, but the observer is no longer dazzled within that world.